Hey there, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into the incredible story of the computer, a journey that takes us from some of the simplest counting tools all the way to the superpowered devices that have, let's be honest, completely reshaped our world.
I mean, just think about that for a second. It feels kind of impossible, right? How on earth did a machine that filled an entire room, weighed literal tons, and had less power than a cheap calculator, how did that thing shrink down into the device you're probably holding in your hand right now? Well, that is the amazing story we're unpacking today. You know, our journey doesn't start with electricity or silicon chips. Nope. It starts way, way earlier, with a simple human need to count things. This is the age of gears and levers and just pure mechanical genius.
What's really staggering when you look at this is the sheer amount of time between these early breakthroughs. Seriously, almost 4,000 years passed between the Abacus and the Pascaline. Then it took another 200 before Babbage even came up with the idea of a programmable machine. Progress back then was, well, glacial is putting it lightly.
And you just can't talk about the beginning without talking about this incredible duo. Babbage, he was the hardware guy. He designed the physical engine. But it was Ada Lovelace who saw its true potential. She wrote what we now consider the world's first computer program, an algorithm for a machine that hadn't even been built. She was the first person to see that these machines could do way more than just crunch numbers.
Okay, so then electricity happens and everything changed. That slow march of progress we were talking about, it suddenly became an all-out sprint, a full-blown revolution that unfolded in 5 distinct world-changing acts.
So here it is, the roadmap for the revolution. We go from these fragile, glowing vacuum tubes to transistors, then to circuits on a chip, then microprocessors, and boom! We land right where we are today, in the age of artificial intelligence. Each and every step was a massive leap in power and a huge reduction in size. The first-generation computers were absolute behemoths. I'm talking about machines like the ENIAC, powered by thousands of super hot, super unreliable vacuum tubes. They were slow, they filled entire rooms, and you needed a whole army of technicians just to keep them running.
And then came the game changer, the transistor. It was tiny, it was solid state, and it was thousands of times more reliable than a vacuum tube. This one little invention made computers smaller, faster, and dependable enough to finally move out of the research lab and into the business world. It changed everything.
The third generation managed to pack even more power into a smaller space with the integrated circuit. So instead of wiring up individual transistors by hand, we could now etch hundreds of them onto one tiny little piece of silicon. This is where the speed and efficiency of computing really took off.
The next big leap was the microprocessor. This basically put an entire central processing unit, the computer's brain, onto a single chip. And this was the innovation that kicked off the personal computer revolution, finally putting the power of computing right on our desks, at home and at work.
And that brings us to today, the 5th generation. The focus now is no longer just about raw calculation, but on intelligence. This is the era of AI, of machine learning, of systems that can recognize patterns, learn on their own, and even make decisions. It's really about creating a thinking machine. So how did we actually get from those room-sized giants to the device in our pocket? To really get your head around the sheer scale of this transformation, you gotta look at the numbers. Just let that sink in. The ENIAC, one of the very first electronic computers, weighed about 30 tons. That's the weight of like 5 adult elephants. We're talking about a true monster of a machine. And now, this. Less than half a pound. The journey from 30 tons to a few ounces is, without a doubt, one of the greatest engineering achievements in all of human history. We didn't just shrink the computer, we totally redefined what it could even be.
And what's crazy is how fast this all happened. The 70s gave us the first kits for hobbyists. Then boom, the 80s with IBM and Microsoft put a PC on every desk. The 90s made them easy to use and hooked them all up to the web. Then the 2000s shrank all that power down and put it right in our pockets. And finally, the 2010s connected all those devices to the cloud, creating the smart, interconnected world we all live in today.
But here's the thing. The evolution isn't over. Not by a long shot. In fact, it might just be getting started. So what's on the horizon? What's the next great leap forward in computing? Well, first up, there's artificial intelligence, which is already a huge part of our daily lives. This is where computers start moving beyond just following our instructions. They begin to learn, to adapt, and to make intelligent decisions on their own, powering everything from the chatbot you argue with for customer service to the software inside a self-driving car. Next is the truly mind-bending world of quantum computing. This stuff basically throws out the simple on or off bit we've used for decades and replaces it with a qubit, which can be both on and off at the same time. This new physics of information could unlock the power to solve problems in medicine and material science that are just impossible right now. And then there's this really wild idea. What if we stopped trying to program intelligence and instead started building computers that work like our own brains? That's the thinking behind neuromorphic computing, designing chips that actually mimic our own neural networks. The goal is to get incredibly efficient natural learning. So what does all this futuristic tech mean for you and me? Well, it means these things are set to completely reshape our reality. We're talking about much smarter AI, medical breakthroughs happening way faster, truly immersive virtual worlds, and computing that's so seamless and invisible it's just part of the fabric of our environment.
Of course, none of this happened by accident. This whole new world was driven by brilliant, determined people who saw the future and then dedicated their lives to actually building it.
This entire revolution was built by individuals. From the early mechanical dreams of Babbage and Lovelace to the theoretical genius of Alan Turing, from the entrepreneurs like Gates and Jobs who put a PC in every home, to Tim Berners-Lee who gave us the World Wide Web to connect them all. We are truly standing on the shoulders of giants.
You know, there's this quote from the computer scientist Alan Kay that just perfectly sums up the spirit of this entire journey. The history of the computer isn't a story of just watching things happen. It's a story of active, relentless, brilliant invention. So, we went from counting with stones to creating pocket-sized supercomputers that fill our entire world. The next step seems to be creating intelligence itself, and that leaves us with one final, fascinating question to ponder. What happens when the machines we've built finally learn to think like us? Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.